Starfighters were ubiquitous in the Star Wars universe. The navies of galactic powers maintained fighter wings numbering in the thousands, while many criminal outfits and independent mercenaries owned starfighters of their own. Thus, as it is to be expected for such a ubiquitous piece of technology, starfighters came in a vast array of models, from popular general-purpose craft like the Z-95 Headhunter to rarer, locally made designs like the Naboo N1. But there was one class of starfighter that was more common than any other, a design so ubiquitous it could be considered the galactic default starfighter. This craft was the CloakShape fighter, and in this video, we'll be analyzing it in detail. For your ribbed pleasure.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The CloakShape was designed and manufactured decades before the Clone Wars by Quat Systems Engineering, a subsidiary of Quat Drive Yards that you might know as the manufacturer of the Delta VII Jedi Starfighter. KSE was short-lived for a KDY subsidiary, but during its brief lifespan, it produced untold numbers of CloakShapes, which it sold to just about everyone. KSE was folded back into KDY during the Imperial era, ending the production of the CloakShape fighter, but the design lineage far outlived its manufacturer. That was because the CloakShape, despite being aggressively average in most respects, was a simple design that was super easy to modify. Many modifications became standardized, produced by third-party companies solely to be used on CloakShapes, and some became so common that many people thought they were a part of the original design. By the time of the Battle of Yavin, there were virtually no unmodified CloakShapes left in the galaxy, but the many modified ones thrived on the used starfighter market. They were versatile, reliable, and dirt cheap, and so they naturally became ubiquitous. At 15 meters in length, the CloakShape looked like a big flying wing with a cockpit module mounted in the center and a pair of 807B9 ion drives mounted under the wings. The fighter's power plant, which was mounted just behind the cockpit, was small and relatively low power, making the average CloakShape somewhat sluggish. The CloakShape had a maximum acceleration of 3,200 Gs in space and a top atmospheric speed of 950 kilometers per hour, and its maneuverability was average. In deep space, its performance suffered due to its small reactor, but its aerodynamic design, especially the maneuvering flaps in its wings, made it surprisingly effective in atmosphere. The CloakShape required a crew of one and could carry up to 40 kilograms of cargo, plus a day's worth of consumables. As a starfighter, the CloakShape was armed and armored, though by default it wasn't shielded. Its hull was quite tough, which was the starfighter's primary selling point, and even with its lack of shields, a CloakShape could shrug off a considerable amount of damage. By default, CloakShape fighters were armed with 2 laser cannons and 2 concussion missile launchers, with the latter having magazines of 8 missiles each. Both of these were mounted under the wing. This loadout wasn't anything special, but it got the job done. The most common modification for CloakShapes was the addition of a Curich engineering rear stabilizer flap, but most CloakShapes had scores of additional modifications. Crafty engineers could specialize a CloakShape in any of a dozen different ways, improving their speed, durability, armament, navigational capabilities, and more. While many CloakShapes experienced only moderate modification, others were all but turned into completely different craft. The sheer range of available modifications gave the CloakShape another distinct advantage over other fighter models. Enemy pilots never knew what to expect when facing one in combat. Many CloakShape owners installed more powerful reactors aboard their ships, as well as larger fuel tanks to allow the craft to operate independently for longer, and more powerful engines that made the CloakShape faster. In later years, it was common for the CloakShape's computer systems, particularly its targeting computer, sensors, navigation systems, to be replaced with newer, more advanced equivalents. The cockpit was easily converted into a detachable escape pod for emergency situations, and most CloakShapes were modified to have a slot for an astromech droid, which could provide spot repairs and navigational assistance. By default, the CloakShape wasn't hyperspace capable like most starfighters of its time, but it was quite easy and quite common for CloakShapes to be equipped with a self-powered hyperdrive sled, which, while not be the best hyperdrives on the market, got the job done. CloakShape compatible hyperdrive sleds were rated as Class 3.0, and they required an onboard astromech to serve as a navicomputer, which meant that CloakShapes that had hyperdrive sleds almost always had astromech slots as well. All of the modifications mentioned thus far were compatible with each other and often employed together. As combined, they made the CloakShape into a reliable, independent long-range craft to rival the Z-95 Headhunter. Naturally, deflector shields were another common modification for CloakShape fighters, though most modified CloakShapes only had middling shield cover. Additional weapons were also common, as you would expect. The most common of these was an added proton torpedo launcher, which supplemented the CloakShape's built-in concussion missile launchers, and presumably additional or more powerful laser cannons were also common. Unlike with other mods, weapon modifications were rarely standardized on CloakShapes, which added to the craft's unpredictability in combat. Most of these modifications were aftermarket, but in some instances, CloakShapes were manufactured with certain modifications for specific clients. This included the White Cloak Fighter, which was designed for the use of the Republic Judicial Forces, particularly the Jedi Order. White Cloaks had more advanced hyperdrive sleds rated as Class 1.5s, a slightly faster top atmospheric speed, room for 1 or 2 passengers, and 2 weeks' worth of consumables, which allowed the fighters to operate more independently and for far longer than the original CloakShape. These were the signature starfighters of the Jedi Order until the development of the Delta 7, and they were also used by a selection of planetary governments and corporations. A few White Cloaks did end up on the black market, however, ending up in the hands of criminal organizations, among them the Anti-Trade Federation terrorist group Nebula Front. The CloakShape's heyday was in the years leading up to the Battle of Naboo, as the Republic's use of the White Cloak made the CloakShape a widely recognized and prestigious design. But this didn't last. The development of the Delta 7 Jedi Starfighter, and later a whole host of more advanced starfighters made for the Republic Starfighter Corps, saw the CloakShape fade from the spotlight. It was eventually taken off production schedules, and its use was discontinued by the Republic turned Empire. It was branded as being outdated and outclassed by most newer Starfighter models. Nonetheless, it continued to see extensive use throughout the Imperial era. Many local governments, especially poorer ones, continued to use CloakShapes for planetary defense, as they were well suited to that role, easy to maintain, and cheap. They were used as patrol craft, as both blockade support and blockade runners, and for anti-piracy duties, in all of which it performed adequately. The CloakShape continued to see legitimate use for decades after it was proclaimed obsolete, and its aging systems were simply swapped out for newer ones as the years went on. Many criminal organizations and mercenaries continued to favor the CloakShape, and by the time of the Galactic Civil War, there were a number of unique and heavily modified CloakShapes belonging to special individuals. The mercenary ace, Jane, flew a CloakShape called Leilana's Dagger, named after his deceased wife, until he was shot down by an Imperial assassin shortly before the Battle of Yavin, while the Anzat Kel Jiro flew a CloakShape named the Predator, which was modified to have a full-blown cargo hold where Jiro held sentience in stasis for use as mid-flight snacks. During the later stages of the Galactic Civil War, the CloakShape was brought back into active service by the New Republic, which was strapped for starfighters in the early years after it wrested Coruscant from the Empire. Nearly 30 years after the Old Republic had phased them out, CloakShapes served the galactic government once more. But the New Republic's CloakShapes were ill-equipped for action in the ongoing Galactic Civil War, even against the Empire's flimsy TIE fighters, and they performed miserably in battles with the Imperial warlord Singe, leading to the destruction of most of the New Republic's CloakShape squadrons. So, that's the story of the CloakShape fighter, the default starfighter of the Star Wars galaxy. But what do you think? Are there other common starfighters you'd like us to take a look at? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comment section below.